Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. How are you? I hope you're having a lovely day. Today we're going to talk about my final presentation, tokenization versus diversity. Do you know the difference? I think you do. I hope you do. But still, we're going to talk about it because it's important. I know we've talked about it some in class, but I'm just going to go over some of the complexities of it and the differences and how we can improve. And I do want to point out before we get started that even though I am talking primarily about people of color and their representation, this presentation also includes other racial groups, ethnicities, and so on, because this is more than just a black and white issue. So we're going to start off basic by discussing the differences between the two terms of diversity and tokenization. Diversity is defined as the state of being diverse or a variety, or having a range of different things. And Google defines tokenization as a perfunctory or symbolic effort to be inclusive to members of minority groups, especially by recruiting a small number of people from underrepresented groups in order to give the appearance of racial or sexual equality within the workforce. Over the years, theater has really improved in diversity and is still a relevant topic in society today outside of theater. Yet sometimes where some think they have diversity, there's actually the practice of tokenization. If you want a visual of diversity versus tokenization, just look at the background of this slide. On the left, we have true diversity. Different ethnic groups are included in this, but regarding skin color, we have a rainbow of shades. And on the right shows tokenization. We do have all these different shades of white, but yet they're all still white, and we only have one person of color. That person's going to stick out like a sore thumb, and they're definitely going to feel like it too. So where do we see tokenization? Unfortunately, we see it a lot more places than we should, but it's kind of subtle unless you are the person being tokenized, in which case it's pretty obvious to spot. The main thing we see in theater is having one person of color cast, and then having that person to fall back on if they ever face any questions regarding diversity. And usually these people are cast as background characters or supporting characters. Going off of that, if they do happen to land a supporting role, sometimes you'll see them cast in stereotypical roles. So say if a black girl was cast in a supporting role, they'd be the loud, sassy black friend. In film, sometimes this is referred to as BBF or SBF, sassy black friend or black best friend. And while this one is less common, sometimes we see theaters taking one or two people from each cultural background to fill a quota. So, for example, we'll have one black person in the cast, one white person, one Asian person, one Hispanic person, and they try to pass that off as diversity. And lastly, another example that is a little bit more common in theater is casting diverse actors as the B cast. So for some reason, which I think is weird, if someone of color gets cast as a lead, the rest of the cast has to match. We can't have some black people. We have to have either all black people or no black people or just one. It doesn't make sense to me. One particular show we can see this in is Frozen on Broadway. So now we're going to take a look at some shows to kind of point out the difference between diversity and tokenization. Let's start with the top left. That is the original Broadway cast of Dear Evan Hansen, except for the guy in the middle. That's supposed to be Ben Platt. As we can see, there's obviously only one person of color in the main cast. During no point of Dear Evan Hansen is race ever mentioned, so there's no particular reason for her to be of color. So that brings the question as to why there's only one person of color. In future casts, it's only Alana Beck who is a person of color in the show and no one else. This led to a tweet by Roman Banks asking if there could ever be a black Evan Hansen on Broadway, and he went on to be the first one in 2018. Next, we have some shows that show clear diversity, like Hadestown on Broadway, Hamilton on Broadway, and Brooklynite, which is the play I presented for my playwright presentation. Hamilton and Hadestown don't really need too much of an explanation. Hamilton puts a focus on having non-white actors, and Hadestown does have white actors, but it's not the majority. And in shows like Hamilton and The Color Purple, their race actually serves a purpose to the story, and they're not there just to be seen. Brooklynite kind of straddles the line back and forth when it comes to tokenization. While they do have one or two people from each cultural background, the cast is so small that they're not placed in the minority, and they actually have a big part in the show. They're not solely placed there to say, hey, I'm black, hey, I'm Asian. They're there to just play their part. And lastly, we have Legally Blonde on Broadway. Taylor, don't kill me. I'm not saying the show technically tokenizes anyone. They do have their moments, but then again, the show is supposed to be exaggerated and funny. They have the stereotypical gay guy. So technically it does tokenize them, but not in a way that is unintentional. So it's intentionally tokenizing them in those moments, but not in a way where they're actually tokenized, if that makes any sense. So how can we fix this? How can we improve? Well, the main thing is to include people who are marginalized and listen to what they have to say. So many people, like quoted by Brees Schwartz, they intellectualize the issue without speaking to those who are affected by it. So it's really important to listen to everyone else's story so you can avoid tokenizing them in the future. And to figure out how you can make theater a better place for everyone and to make everyone feel included. Second, don't dissociate yourself from the issue. Lots of people say, oh, I'm not racist, I have black friends. Oh, I'm not tokenizing you because you're included in the cast. When really it's a huge problem in itself. Sometimes as a director or a casting director or whatever, you have to take responsibility and figure out how you can fix the issue because sometimes you are the problem. And lastly, think of intent versus impact. So in the previous slide, you saw does validation matter? And in previous plays like Fairview, we discussed why is America so obsessed with race? When really, some of America isn't really obsessed with race. It's just that race has a lot to do with our lives. Usually we hear this from, or at least I hear this a lot from white people. Why are you so obsessed with race? Why are you always bringing race into it? Well, for you, race doesn't affect every part of your life, but for some people it does. In regards to theater, we want to see ourselves represented. We want to feel like we're actually there for a reason. We don't want to feel hopeless, like we're in this profession for no reason because we're not going to be noticed or we're going to be tokenized and put in a certain role because of the color of our skin. I do have a lot more I want to talk about this, but I am about at time, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. If you ever want to discuss this more with me, let me know. I do know a lot more about things other than race, but I would be happy to talk about this with you because I have a lot to say on the topic. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful night.